Hi, my name is Daniel Lanzilotta, and I call myself the plastician. I'm an environmental artist, and I use ocean debris, stuff that I find on the beaches. I call it harvesting plastic off the beaches because it seems that the amount of plastics that are coming up on the beaches is sort of sustainable in a weird way because it's always coming, it's always there. And so over the last 20 years, when I started this innocently, I was sitting by the beach with my son at the time in the southwest of France in Biarritz, and I would make stuff, and he would play along the beach, and one thing led to another, and then some time went by, and he's 24 now. I became an environmentalist through this work, and I used the work to bring awareness to what's happening to the oceans and the amount of plastics that are in the waterways, not just oceans, but just about everywhere. And I spend a lot of time dumpster diving, and I walk the streets and I examine trash, but most of it's coming from from beaches that I've personally walked. So the debris that I collect, I take and I break it down into smaller parts. And I always try to work in public. I always try to be in a place where people will see me making stuff. And sometimes I have a piece at certain stages of it's being finished. And people are very intrigued by this, and they sit down and they talk, and we engage in conversation. And I start telling them about the history of the piece and what the pieces come from. And I can have people sit there for a long, long time, and we'll engage and we'll talk and we'll have a dialogue about what's happening to the environment. So my job as an environmentalist is not to beat you over the head and say don't use plastic. My job is to bring some beauty to the situation so we can have a backdoor way of coming to a place to have a discussion. No one wants to be beaten up about what they're doing with their lives, and so I come through this other means to come to the sensibility about what plastic debris is and how I get to the pieces I have. So I usually use mechanical means, or I use different heating elements, some of which I've invented, to achieve this type of the look that I want from the pieces. And the pieces are always from some kind of plastic, and sometimes I use discarded umbrellas, which is also a very big problem in the environment because it clogs up the storm drains as it gets washed off the streets. You'll see these after mostly rainstorms. People will discard their umbrellas, and umbrellas are very toxic. They have all kinds of metal, chromium plating, and plastics and nylons, and they're not good. And so I find these all over the place, and I do spend a lot of time walking up and down streets in urban areas. Just about anywhere I go, I'm always examining trash. So trash to me is just displaced energy, which is fossil fuels that haven't been used to its full potential. And so we have a lot of waste in our environment when there's really nothing else for us to think about other than the fact that if we don't have a healthy environment, we won't have cultural outlets. We won't have museums. We won't have galleries. We won't have universities. We'll have a lot of sick people, and we'll have a die-off of natural environments. And so my job as a environmental artist is just to bring awareness through beauty. And I always bring it back to the idea of the human connection. So I'd like to say what my work is about is bringing significance to the seemingly insignificant. And I used to think that it was about consumption, and I thought it was about recycling. And then I realized through my education that a lot of the stuff and the facts that we don't have connections to our objects anymore. We've objectified the objects and say we love our phones, we love our cars, we love our shoes, we love our home, all these things, but we really have a hard time saying I love you to another person. So my story is about bringing it back to the human connection and having people have a better understanding of what they're doing. It takes a certain type of person to understand that their impact is not as an individual but collectively. It winds up being about being an individual, but it's a collective effort in the long run to try to improve what's happening in the environment. And plastics is a big part of it. So I always like to think that my work will stand on its own as an artistic form, and that what I bring to it, other than what the message is that it's a real cohesive way of looking at it. And we can look at circular economies and try to understand the mechanisms that are at work here. So instead of having a linear economy as we have now, we would have circular economies. And this would affect everything from all cultural institutions to higher education. But primarily, I think it has to go back to primary school and teaching children how to utilize the things that they have in their lives and to use them to their full potential, and to understand that the objects that they do use bring no harm to the environment. It's that sort of idea that I'm trying to get across in my work. The process is long and tedious. I spend a lot of time making little pieces to make assemblages, but what the best part about it is to engage people in public where I'm working, along a river where there's a picnic bench, or in a cafe, or somewhere where I can engage people, because I usually have a piece out there that's in some stage of being finished, and people are very intrigued by this. They're always amazed